throughout the meeting. Watch for useful resources and links in the chat. For questions or sharing your vital conditions work, please notify the event team through the Q&A button. If you don't see this option at the bottom of your screen, click on More and toggle to Q&A. Provide your name and your organization to alert the facilitator. We'll let you know when it's your turn. Please stay on mute until you're called, then turn on your camera and mic. As I hand the microphone to Bobby, I want to remind you that he is the Director of Systems Strategy for the Rippel Foundation and its ReThink Health Initiative. And he, as well, is a visiting scientist at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Bobby and Bailey's bio sketches were included in the packet of office hours materials that you should have received this morning via email. And now, Professor Milstein.
Well, thank you all. It's a real treat to be together. I'm such an immense fan of the National Forum and what you and this huge network of colleagues are doing to try to make the most of this opportunity to make great strides, not only toward, heart disease and stroke prevention, but the kind of lives that we can all live together. So I'll just do a little bit of a setup about what I've been thinking about and what I've been seeing these last few weeks, and we'll hear some stories from Bailey, and then most of this time is really devoted to the National Forum colleagues who are assembled here. So let's go forward. Just a little reminder about our organization, Rippel and ReThink Health. Everything we do can be kind of summarized in this 5-word phrase of thriving together through shared stewardship. We'll get 2 clicks up here and put a little bit of structure around that. We join with others to realize a unifying and what we think is a very measurable expectation of all people and places thriving together, no exceptions. Now, of course, our health well-being, it depends on a system that's not yet built for everyone to thrive. But even systems that are fraught with poverty, racism, preventable illness, authoritarianism, like toxic forces that we're dealing with, but all those forms of injustice can be transformed through shared stewardship. We can talk another day about the sort of details about stewardship, but if we go to the next slide, the key thing that gives me hope, and one of the things that's been proven over again throughout history, and even in this moment, is that when systems collapse, people rise. And that dynamic shows how people with a just cause can actually be the ones to change failing systems for the better. Now, we don't have to do a seminar on the evidence to know that the kind of world that we've created is not reaching our full potential for health and well-being, and the systems that we've set up really don't need to be defended. What they need to be is reimagined and renewed. And there's better and worse ways of doing that. So in a second, I'll sort of describe a little bit of what the signs that we're seeing, that people want significant system change, but they also want it to be humane and healing and allow them to feel like they are connected to other people, and together we're able to do, sort of great things together. And it's really this vital conditions framework that points us in that direction. It puts belonging and civic muscle at the center, and it allows we, the people, to be able to create communities that are expressed in all of these vital conditions to establish a thriving natural world and the basic needs for health and safety, clean air, clean water, nutritious food, freedom from addiction and trauma and violence, but all the way into humane housing and meaningful work and wealth, lifelong learning, reliable transportation. If we go to the next slide, there is, like, in this moment, there is such immense sort of chaos and cruelty that there is a really interesting conversation that's coming up. One of my favorite emails that I got recently, just a few weeks ago, was from a colleague who said that they'd spent their career working on health equity and always struggled with the idea that it's kind of built around a double negative, right? If we prevent something bad, that somehow that's going to turn into something good. And that is sort of true, right? I mean, if we eliminate the risk factors for heart disease and stroke, if we eliminate the structures that perpetuate structural racism and sexism, that's a step forward, but it's not the same thing as actually liberating ourselves and creating the world that we most want. And so the search for something that's more direct and a little bit different in this moment is really calling a lot of people to say, I can do more. I could do something different. I can rethink this work. And to go from just sort of an observer into this to being a champion in a rising movement. This is exactly the kind of spirit and energy that that we can sort of harness into. There are ways of transforming systems that, inflict chaos and cruelty, and most people do not want that. What they want is something healing, something that expresses love and connection to each other, and a world that matters for them and the people and places they care about the most. Um, let's we can get those slides back. We get a couple more visuals, and we'll get into our dialogue. I lost them. Yeah. So this momentum, that curiosity about, is there something that can give us sort of the near edge of the next generation work that we could be doing? And a lot of people are finding that in this framework for articulating what are the conditions that we most want to establish. We've got nationwide organizations like the National Forum and regional organizations all across the country who are doing this work. And you heard from many of them in the October session, and maybe we'll hear even more of your stories today. If we just go click once, I just want to acknowledge that the National Forum, ooh, one more click. Did we lose the National Forum's logo? Back. Ooh, the other way back. Ooh, one, supposed to be the National Forum's logo on that slide. Apologies for that. So the National Forum is creating a really interesting space for um, sort of group dialogue and field-wide thinking about what it takes to think differently and act differently in this moment. And Bailey, we've just met, but I'm really coming to see how the kind of energy that you and your colleagues at the National Association of Community Health Centers can bring so much lift to this rising movement. And unless folks haven't caught this yet, Bailey is probably the first person on the planet to have a job title with vital conditions in her title. So it's sort of illustrates that potential when we start organizing around the things we most want to create, not the things that we most want to stop. We can end up bringing so much more energy into this work. So I do want to invite all of you to use this Q&A function and the chat function. If you have a story to tell, a question, an experience you've had around this, this is really your time to get into that. I'm just going to spend another couple minutes just hitting the highlights of a few pieces that are giving me some excitement in this moment. There is no doubt, and we do not need to spend our time and energy on the signs of adversity and chaos and cruelty that we can see everywhere. There is a sort of doom loop of polarization and dysfunction that's happening, and it's creating a lot of fear and anxiety. And it's meant to. It's meant to be. It's meant to inspire fear and to distract us from the things that we most want to do together. On the other hand, there are these green shoots of promise and pluralism, and the kinds of connections that I think that I see colleagues making when they really focus on what can we do to make a meaningful stride toward a future with everyone thriving together. That's where we can begin to see the energy of a rising movement taking shape. Next slide. There's a crowd counting consortium that folks at Harvard had built, and they put out a really interesting study a week or two ago that suggests that there are twice as many people who have taken to the streets in 2025, just in the last few weeks, than in 2017, which may in some ways go against. It surprised me and others because the nature of the gatherings that are happening here that are sort of resistance are smaller and happening in more places across the country, whereas in 2017 they were giant rallies. So they were more conspicuous, but now there are more of them and in more places. So that's on the kind of resistance side. There are a lot of people who said, I don't want to go down the road that we feel like we're going down. But that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in making significant change in the systems that shape our lives together. So blocking is really only the beginning of this story. If we go to the next slide, there are lots of signs of people who are really interested in bridging and building toward a very different future that includes everybody. The data from More in Common that came out last week or 2 weeks ago, I think, this is a really interesting report because it demonstrates that there are large majorities of Americans who are actually eager to, or open, or just a little bit uncertain about how to connect across the many lines of difference. It may be race and ethnicity, or religion, or socioeconomics, or even political viewpoints. But the main finding that they came out with was that what people are most interested in bridging to do is to achieve a mutual goal that improves their community. And the vital conditions are a decent definition of what are some of those goals that we can, arm in arm, begin to make significant change around. And it's this dynamic of having people feel like they belong and building civic muscle together that actually gets beyond the scarcity mindset. One more click and you'll see an animation. That's how we grow the pie. We don't have to divide a limited pool of resources and I get some, it means other people aren't getting theirs. That is a myth. We have more than enough capability and immense resources in this nation to turn toward each other and build things that we can't do alone. And that dynamic is really only beginning to take even more energy as more and more people say that I want to be part of something that creates health and well-being for myself and the people and places that I love. Next slide. There are colleagues who've been watching the growth of this bridging and building movement for a long time. One of them is Kristen Hansen, who recently gave a terrific speech in Ohio to an organization called the Divided Community Project. And her message to them, I just want to pick off a few of the things that she said in this speech, because it's a decent summary of the reasons to care about this. If you think belonging and civic muscle is like, nice to have, or maybe vague, I don't know what it means. Next slide. There are millions, I mean, tens of millions of dollars that are now going into investing in communities that want to and are actually in the practice of turning toward each other and building that kind of sense of belonging and civic muscle. Hundreds of communities, millions of dollars from just one, funder cooperative, the Trust for Civic Life. Likewise, next click. There are mapping activities underway. The National Civic League and their Healthy Democracy ecosystem has 7,000 plus organizations across the country that are trying to create opportunities for people to connect with each other. The Weave project is showing where we can build social trust together. So this is a real sort of visible activity if you're paying attention to where it's taking root and that groundswell of energy around it. What people are thirsty for is the opportunity to do this work. They're not necessarily, so I guess the question is, how can we, colleagues throughout the National Forum and others, create opportunities that marry the agenda around heart disease and stroke with the thirst for civic connection that so many people are demonstrating? Last couple here. The Civic Bridges Act is a piece of remarkable bipartisan legislation. What left and right agree on is that we need a different kind of civic life in this country and that we can renew that. Remarkably, 400 people across the YMCAs across the country are involved in helping to champion this work. And I know for a fact that folks across the Y are in their own meetings even today to talk about how they're going to organize around vital conditions. So this is a real thing that is gaining traction, not nearly as strong as it could be, but definitely moving in the right direction. Next slide. I wish I had the time to tell stories about colleagues that just since inauguration, I've either connected with or visited the shaded places on this slide. And I can tell you without reservation that these are places that are not sort of giving into fear and skepticism. They're places that are saying, we may not get what we expect from our institutions or from our government these days, but we can create things together through the expansion of belonging and civic muscle and us joining together as shared stewards, charting a course in our future. What they say to each other sounds a lot like the next slide, right? That learning about building vital conditions through shared stewardship, it gives us a different vocabulary, a different way to think about health disparities. And critically, it's a way to change what's talked about in an organization, but it's also a way to shift culture. And this is not what we're facing in this opportunity to really move the agenda for chronic disease forward. It's not just programs and policies and sort of projects here and there. We need significant culture change, and that's really what this work entails. So I want to stop my comments here and just turn to Bailey Spates, who is really at the front lines of doing this work with community health centers across the country. Bailey, what does it feel like to be the first you know, professional with a focus on job title on vital conditions in your job title, and to work with colleagues who care about it so much.
I definitely think that they're big shoes to fill, but also, that's how you grow. And so I'm excited, and I'm excited to see how I'm able to also bring people behind me to join this movement. So I'm excited. I'm definitely fired up. I think this is a perfect time for this to be happening. And, I wish, I did have a predecessor to be able to say, hey, this is what's going on, but everything is within its time. So I'm definitely blessed for this opportunity, and I'm really ready to just support additional teams in implementing the vital conditions across their organizations. So yeah, but in the same breath, hi everyone. My name is Bailey Spates. Like I said before, I'm the project manager of Vital Conditions Framework at the National Association of Community Health Centers. We serve over 1,400 health centers across the United States, territories, and then we also serve over 32.5 million patients. So this work is impactful for not only health centers, but also all the patients we serve. We were founded in 1971, actually out of the civil rights movement. So there's also a lot of synergy in that belonging and civic engagement. And we're working to promote efficient, high quality, comprehensive healthcare that is accessible, culturally competent, and linguistically competent, community directed, and patient centered for all. As you can see at the bottom, we have a plethora of different ways that we support our patients, from providing technical assistance to just being that person that can hug them as a provider, and also creating community within the organization from our employee standpoint. Next slide, please. So I know this is a little bit hard to read. I'm not going to read everything, but these are our pillars that we stand upon. So we do provide most services when it comes to social justice, as well as making sure that those infrastructures that health centers have are equipped to serve the different communities and diverse communities that they serve. We are mission driven and making sure that we're impacting the workforce, and not only making sure we're bringing providers to health centers, but also diversifying that platform to make sure that we do have doulas who are able to provide services, that we do have other community health workers that are able to go into the community and assess, different types of social needs. We also want to make sure that we're having a standard when it comes to sustainable funding. Health centers are funded through the Section 330 Public Health Service grant. And so we want to make sure that we continue to advocate for them on the Hill when it comes to making sure we're sustaining that funding. As always, we're wanting to improve care models to really just be able to serve the patient to the highest standard that we can, and support partnerships like this one when it comes to diversifying and also creating different examples of our work. So now we get to look at Bobby a little bit more, but we will be going on to our next slide, and I will be sharing more about our team. So we actually have some of our team members on this call right now. Chloe Destinoble, who is our manager for health and well-being. She's also a resource if you do need anything when it comes to social drivers of health. Our director is Nalani Tarrant, and then Sydney Parsley is also part of our team, and then myself encompasses our social drivers of health team. So thank you, Chloe, for joining. And we also have Katie Ferriani from our team as well, who is working with us on food as medicine work, and also some other different topics. She just joined, so that's why she's not on this slide, but we definitely wanted to give her a shout out. So as we get into this, I did want to say that NAC has definitely taken a stance in making sure that we implement the vital conditions framework, not only into health center settings, but also to the communities that they serve. So we do have a web page here that I've also posted, and it is interactive. So if you click the wheel, you'll be able to see additional stories of how health centers are implementing the vital conditions. I am going to go into a little bit more of certain stories, but I definitely encourage you to, once you get the slide deck, or if you want to Google it now, take a look around and be inspired about what health centers are doing. Next slide, please. So we will start off with our belonging and civic muscle as a vital condition. This one is very special. This is based in Mississippi from the Aaron E. Henry Community Health Services Center. And two ways that they impact the community when it comes to belonging and civic muscle is that they host National Voter Registration Days. This is not just any voter registration day. They actually go to the community. They go to different apartments. They go to different high schools. They're not waiting for those people to come to them. They're going out into the community and making themselves known, which is a great thing because not only are they providing primary care, but they're also showing you that you are a primary citizen within that community. They also implement different newsletters, which I posted to the side on the right. So this one was from April. It is a bit small, but they try to highlight what's going on in the community because we want you to know that you are a part of this as much as anyone else. And that's something that we wanted to highlight from this story. Something else to note here is that the person who actually crafted this story. Her name is Mahalia Jackson, and her mother was actually one of the founders of this health center. So there's a lot of synergy between people understanding how important it is to not only be a part of this movement, but it's sometimes it's a family initiative of making sure that we keep community within the community. Next slide, please. So next we have our thriving natural world as a vital condition. And this is about making sure we have sustainable ways to not only support our climate that we're around, but also our environment. This one is about Crescent Care Community Health Center that is based in Louisiana. And they actually put solar panels on their health center properties to not only be able to reduce costs, but also to make sure that they're more efficient and a steward of their community. If you know anything about Louisiana or the South, we get a lot of rain, we get a lot of different weather that comes around. And so finding ways to create more sustainable changes to make sure that we are able to best support our patients is something that we wanted to point out when it comes to this vital condition of thriving natural world. In the same breath, I know it is a bit small, but I would like to say that it says cost savings from lower utility bills paired with incentives for installing solar and storage is expected to give Crescent Care a large financial return. When we look at health centers, we already know that they're providing from a space of those scarce federal fundings. So being able to diversify their funding streams and make sure that they're using their funds more efficiently will also help them to enable services and in the long run be able to provide additional services for their community. So as we move on to the next slide, this one is about meaningful work and wealth. So when it comes to meaningful work and wealth, when we look at the vital condition, it's not only about, the workforce and jobs, but also being able to allow people to understand that with being a citizen in that community, you also are a steward to be able to not only work, but also to be able to have extended resources to provide wealth for yourself. So this actually was an awesome opportunity the Charlotte Community Health Clinic got. It was a grant from Bank of America. It's called the Neighborhood Builders Program, and it is a grant that basically allows them to not only extend their workforce, but also be able to build out their human resources management department to better assist not only the community, but to bring in additional staff members to be able to enable additional services. So this is the picture right here to the left. The lady in the pink is the CEO. This is Miss Carolyn Allison. And fun fact, they actually applied for this grant back in 2018 and they did not get it. So this also speaks to health center resiliency of, sometimes you might not get it the first time, but that doesn't mean that you should stop trying. Obviously, 7 years later, they were able to get the grant. And it means so much more to them now because back in 2018, they were only able to operate off of those federal funds. But now being able to have additional revenue, they're able to provide additional services to their community. I do have Mr. Aaron Simmons, who's on the side right here, because he was highlighted as a steward of the community. And this also speaks to health centers, not only working within their four walls, but also out into the community in North Carolina. This is in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so it was special for them because their community is so small as far as the demographics of the area. And so having Aaron already being so visible in the community, now he has even more influx and more ability to go in and really support community-based organizations or even host community events because of the training that Bank of America will be giving to him to be able to provide additional services. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to talk about reliable transportation as a vital condition. This one is a special story from a health center because it is a rural health center. When I say rural, this means that there are not basically like grocery stores, or there's not really any type of like resources that are available to people that live within these areas for 20 to 30 miles. So this health center in Colorado, Valley-Wide Health System, and the title of this was actually Take a Ride with Valley-Wide, because they created a system to be able to go and actually pick up patients at certain bus places and also take them back. If they need any type of pharmacy or if they need groceries, they've enabled this system to be able to not only provide transportation, but also basically it's like an Uber at a health center. But the best part about it is they know that they're going to be able to go to the health center, get the care that they need, and also be taken back home. And it mitigates the point of being able to have to travel 30 plus miles to be able to get to the health center or wherever they need to. I know that this map is a little small, but if you can see here that the red is where most of those facilities are, and the blue is where a lot of those citizens live. So being able to get to where they need to be also decreases the chances of them not being able to, take care of their stress management or any type of chronic illnesses. So this also reiterates the fact that like these vital conditions are so much more than just a single person, but it's uplifting the community by providing services that maybe wouldn't have been there through the federal government or more localized efforts. So as we move to the last slide, that is it. But I will say to definitely take a look at our Vital Conditions webpage because there's so many different stories. Those are just a few that I decided to highlight. And also to inspire you all that there are so many different ways that you could implement the Vital Conditions framework and to just think large because your efforts might start small, but that's how you start, right? So thank you. And we can start with questions.
That's great, Bailey. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't see any in the Q&A yet, but now's the time to raise a hand, flag something on your mind, and we'll go from there. Let's see. Ron Dahl, how can the vital conditions be used as a framework for monitoring and evaluating programs? Any examples? Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we can dig in a little bit. I feel obliged to say that one of the sessions in the October conference was about data, and began to talk about some of this, but it just kind of you know kind of scratch the surface of a really complicated question. One thing that I think about when I hear a question like this is typically when we think about evaluation and measurement, we're usually thinking about measuring like where have we come from where we once were, right? So it's like looking backward and where are we now and where how far have we moved? This work is really adding a different orientation, looking ahead and say, we expect to get to a place where, the world is built for everyone to thrive together. We have vital conditions in place for everybody. And if there's any shortfall, right, if some have them, others are systematically denied or falling short, that's unfinished work for all of us to be able to do this. And so the question is really, how close are we to making the next big stride? And when we do make important strides, we celebrate it. When we make moves that are going in the wrong direction, we acknowledge it and course correct as swiftly as possible. And so this is what I like to think of as kind of a navigational framework, right? We're bending the arc of history in a particular direction. Belonging in civic muscle allows us to apply the pressure. It doesn't just bend on its own. And the measurement is really looking at how can we take actions that are going to pull us into that next big step in this long intergenerational journey. That's kind of the evaluation paradigm. We can talk about the actual measures and kind of evaluation procedures in a minute. I'm happy to go down that road, but I just wanted to offer it's as simple as orienting yourself to where are we going next and not just always looking in the rearview mirror. And I saw you nodding a lot on that, Bailey. Do you have any thoughts about this question of how do you mark success? How do you chart progress?
I really think it's like, where are you at right now? That's your current benchmark. So, are you collaborating with community-based organizations who are doing the work that you're seeking to do? What partnerships do you have? I think that's the biggest thing is like, we are stronger together than we are in silos. And a lot of times we are doing a lot of this siloed work. And so I would really, look to your community to see what are they already doing because the community is going to tell you exactly what they need, right? So, if there is any type of food insecurity, that could be right there of, hey, let's put a food pantry together or, let's cook meals on Fridays for people because it also is like when people are in community together, they're going to be talking about, whatever is going on with them, building on that belonging and civic muscle. So definitely looking at where you are and also look at what's being done in your community currently and how you can scale that up. So you might not necessarily have to like reinvent something, but maybe just support what's already being done as well.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Our colleagues at the Community Commons and the Institute for People, Place, and Possibility have developed collections around how do we measure thriving together, right? I mean, what is the science of thriving together? We can measure things about, kind of our experience as individuals. Are we thriving? Are we struggling? Are we suffering? Are we dealing with any number of afflictions? But this work is not oriented just around individuals, as you've said, Bailey. it's really also about establishing the conditions around whole communities. And so we can also measure vital conditions. And so there are suites of measures that can be organized into data frameworks that can be interpreted as, where are we around the vital conditions? That is one of the data frameworks that you'll see in this link. And lastly, the third step of the story is, vital conditions don't just change themselves. They change because of the strength of shared stewardship. So we can look for signs of where people are beginning to, connect together and join forces to be able to do things they can't do alone. And to me, that's kind of the building blocks of a measurement framework that allows each of us as individuals, as organizations, and as whole networks to be able to say, how do we contribute to a unifying sort of move in society, but also gauge the contributions that each of us make. And it's as simple as that three-part story. Pay attention to who's thriving, struggling, and suffering. Pay attention to the vital conditions around them, and pay attention to the strength of shared stewardship. If you grow all three of those, you're going to unlock a major movement. Great question. Let me see. We got some others. Brenda, do you want to tell us your story about what you're doing in Africa? If you're in a place to come off mute, we'd love to hear a little bit about the circumstances you're experiencing. And it's possible Brenda may not be in a place where she could talk. So the floor is open for others. What are you experiencing? What are your questions?
I would also like to ask, how have you been implementing the vital conditions framework, or what are you seeing in your communities?
So Andy's got a good question here. Can the Gallup Wellbeing Index be broken out into state and county level? Absolutely. The answer to that is yes. There's a paper that I'll put in the chat that tracked county level changes in thriving and struggling, suffering. Carly Riley, R-I-L-E-Y. The problem is they don't publish it all that often. And so that the reporting systems around the Gallup measures are a little bit hard to predict. I have trouble. Sorry. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. Give me 1 second to give you this. Sorry, this is taking me longer than I thought. Yeah, trends in geographical variation. So Andy, this is the latest kind of report that I've seen that breaks it apart into geography, small scale geography. The data platform that IP3 has. Oh, I'll give you another example of the Fox Valley Data Exchange. Is an amazing example of doing this. Take a look at the Fox Valley Data Exchange. This is an entity that was created by scores of organizations in the Fox Valley region of Wisconsin. So this is a pretty rural area. It's in between Green Bay and Madison. So this is like 19 municipalities along a river valley called the Fox River, who for several decades have been thinking about themselves as an interdependent region and have been having a very impressive conversation about what is going to be well-being in the next generation. This is a place that has had some pretty impressive healthy eating, active living coalitions. The Way to the Fox Valley was one of their obesity initiatives that really focused on healthy eating and active living and sort of the built environment as points of system change. And then they started to ask, how we could do these risk factor oriented programs and projects all we want, but are we really going to achieve the generational change that we're looking for? And there are just so many issue areas that we don't have enough people and community capacity to have a coalition around every issue area. So they started to organize around what they called Imagine Fox Cities that lifted up, sort of aspirations for what they wanted themselves and the next generation to experience. They started taking neighbor well-being surveys to find out who feels like they're thriving, who's struggling and suffering, who feels they belong. This was all organized, deeply rooted around questions about the vital conditions. And after a while, so many organizations were touched by this way of working that they decided to pool their assets together and build a common data system, which is the Fox Valley Data Exchange. And so when you go to look at how it's built, you can navigate all this online. It looks at their county and small area geography, and they bring all the data that they're able to assemble from national data sets as well as some local data systems into a place where anybody in this region can have that information at their fingertips. And so it's a really good example of the small area analysis that is now organized around vital conditions and thriving and struggling and suffering.
I see we have a couple questions, and there's also some in the chat as well.
Yeah, go for it, Bailey. What are you seeing?
Do you want to do the Q&A or the chat? I think I'll address Grace's question.
Okay.
You talk a little about communicating the vital conditions. Sometimes I struggle in writing while talking about solutions while not downplaying the struggles people are facing, but also not focusing too much on how bad things are going. So first and foremost, I think that, providing that awareness of the situation provides context, right? So, I don't think you should shy away from whatever the situation is. If anything, that should also motivate you to say the work that you are doing and the vital conditions to kind of mitigate whatever is going on with the bad things that are going on. In the same breath, in order to communicate the vital conditions, I love to start with the social drivers of health because that's more like an interpersonal level. At NAC, we use something called the Prepare Screening Tool, which is only for one person. And, they go down a plethora of questions to basically figure out, what those social needs are and how health centers can best identify them. And so when I take it a step forward, when looking at the vital conditions, it's looking at more of that community level. So although, maybe bad things are going on in the community, there's also probably a lot of good things going on. And I think that little spark of hope that you do have, expand on that. Even if you feel like it's not something large, like I said before in the beginning, you have to start somewhere, right? Like you might start in the mud, but you could end up with a garden of flowers. I love analogies, but it's a great way to paint a picture of your mindset is really can take you so far. So if you see it as bad, that's what it's going to be. And obviously some situations are worse than others, but it's also implementing that optimism of, hey, I have 7 different ways I can address the community and figure out how I can best assist them. So start with one vital condition. If you're just looking at transportation, you don't have to tackle them all at one time. Really hone in on that in your community and then scale up as you feel more comfortable, and as you see an influx of need in your community of, the next vital condition. So Grace, I hope that answered your question. I'm willing to chat offline or provide more clarity.
That's great. Yeah, so we've got 2 questions in the Q&A here. One is, how does this work and mission, how will it be impacted by the current administration? And another one about how can the recent decrease in funding for essential services like food banks, how can organizations continue to support vital conditions? So these are both important questions, and I think I can maybe speak to both of them simultaneously, which is, and I'll tell a little story with a graphic here in a second, but this work is intergenerational, right? It is not gonna collapse or fully flourish under any single like governmental era. This is really about that quest, the human quest. Human societies would never have been able to form at all if we didn't have some capacity to care for each other. We also have the capability of inflicting immense harm on each other. And so how do we actually learn over time about what it takes to be interdependent and to thrive together as unique people and in a common world? a colleague of mine said recently that this movement is for anybody who's curious about better ways to thrive together. And I feel that, right? I mean, it's like, how can we learn from the lessons of history and the lessons of what we're experiencing day to day to be able to discover what's our path through the adversity that we face to be able to unlock the full potential for people's well-being. We're never going to remove adversity. There's always going to be headwinds. The question is, how do we navigate together through those so that we don't turn against each other and we don't believe that some of us can thrive in a world where others are struggling and suffering? That myth, the illusion of separateness, is really the source of a lot of dysfunction, and I understand it grows out of fear that the status quo isn't working for lots and lots of people, and it's very easy to, when people are afraid and uncertain, to turn them against each other. Those of us who care about health and well-being, and believe in the vision of entire community health, that we can be the ones to say that's not the only way to produce change. And so I'll tell this with a little story, because I sometimes get quite lost in this work, and it helps to have a sort of a connect the dots sort of diagram. So maybe this will answer the question about how do we deal with the pressures around food banks and others as well. If the idea is to try to get to a place where more people are thriving, fewer are struggling and suffering, we got to be really concrete that comes out of vital conditions are what create the experience of thriving, and adversity and urgent need is what creates that experience of struggling and suffering. This work gets a lot easier to understand if we're specific about what are those vital conditions. And this was one of those steps forward, is like, let's not just talk broadly about social determinants or broadly about vital conditions. Let's spell them out in a way that is visible and measurable, and is connected around the values we have. We're not just interested in housing. We want humane housing for everybody. It's got to be safe, affordable, in neighborhoods that aren't segregated. There's like a lot of criteria here, and all of those are spelled out in this framework. And so the remarkable thing is how many people agree to those things. We don't need randomized trials to demonstrate the virtues of these vital conditions. It gets even better to see when we juxtapose the vital conditions against the urgent services. In any moment, any of us may be in a crisis, right? We could be, we could be facing food insecurity and really depend on the life-saving or life-altering experience of generosity that comes through a food bank. And the same goes for acute care for mental or physical illness or injuries. The same goes for environmental cleanup or homeless services. Like the suite of urgent services are expressions of stewardship, but there's no way we could urgent service our way to thriving, right? That comes out of looking more deeply at the legacies for living together. And so there may be times and places when people are experiencing such adversity that we really do need to invest more in our urgent service capacity, but we can't over rely on urgent services as the only way to do this work, because that ends up in sort of building an economy that is built around expecting there to be a lot of people who are struggling and suffering, and we build an entire economy around our adversity. That kind of locks us into an over-reliance on something we don't want to see. Better to kind of connect the values of purpose and profit and build an economy that is investing in vital conditions and investing in people's well-being. There are a lot of forces out there that are looking for what the 21st century economy is going to look like, that know that we can't keep, extracting and exploiting each other and the planet to be able to do this. And so the moves toward a well-being economy are well underway. And so the issue, my answer to your question here is this is not an either or, right? We can care for each other in crisis, but we can escape. There's a path to escape that spiral of constant crisis by making deliberate moves toward investing and reinvesting in these vital conditions. Nobody knows what the path toward doing that is going to look like in your community, other than the residents of that community working together and figuring out how can we heal through the adversity we're feeling, and how can we express the public love that that everybody deserves. So that's hopefully that diagram may be helpful in some way. And it's kind of how I think about how do we navigate through, tough, challenging times, without ever giving up on we're not going to erode our aspiration to thrive together. we're going to be relentless at doing it. And it may be a longer, harder road when we're facing, division and such fear, but we can overcome that fear by turning toward each other. So far, so good. I'm not seeing others in the Q&A so far. So folks can, just raise a hand or come off mute.
Bobby and Bailey, I think the National Forum works with Republican and Democratic and independent mayors throughout the country in different sizes and types of communities. And one thing that they generally share in common is a relentless drive to achieve a positive vision for their communities, to set that vision and then lead people, engage people throughout the community in moving that direction. And we're increasingly hearing mayors talk in terms of vital conditions as a way to galvanize public support and imagination around that direction, and seem to be getting a lot of buy-in.
Yeah, it's gratifying to hear that you're seeing those signs. We've certainly seen it as well. There are a number of elected officials who have said privately, look, I cannot get up on stage and talk about social determinants, but I have no trouble standing up and talking about all of these vital conditions. It just feels more natural, more intuitive. And so there's just on that level, like, how can we speak to a whole population and not look at our 50-50 partisan divide, but look at our 80-20 or our 90-10 or our 99-1 divisions, which are really about most people really do want to live in a world where other people can live as well. And they're very thirsty to contribute and lives of meaning to be able to make that happen. And when elected officials call us into our capabilities as residents together, it can unlock a lot of potential. And we've seen elected officials, sort of build their platforms around ideas about belonging and contribution. I'll offer just another little metaphor. Bailey, you talked about the power of metaphors in this work. And, like we have to start thinking less about our government or our society as a vending machine where we pay taxes and we get services back. Really, it's more like a barn raising where together we can orchestrate the assets that we do have. And those assets do not all flow from Washington. They flow in and through communities. And when you look at the power of belonging civic muscle, it is really priceless. That's the power of a commonwealth, right? And so if you begin with the assets that start locally, then we can bring in assets from others from afar. And the key word of what I heard in your question, John, is the relentless. No one's going to come and save us, particularly communities that have been, struggling and suffering over generations. So the issue is how can we build the assets together that allow us to keep doing this work generation after generation, and without any sense that we may not see it fully realized in our time, but we can make great strides in our time. And that's what great elected officials are able to do.
Absolutely. I would say from like the health center perspective. So every year we host our National Health Center Week, and that's actually where we invite mayors, we invite different legislators to actually come to the community and see, where their federal dollars are going, where, the community that they are serving, what they're doing. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like, tell your story when you are able to have those sit down meetings, or standing meetings with the elected officials, because that way you can better advocate for yourself and they can see firsthand, what's going on in the community. We also always tell health centers to go for that local level. Like you said before, the mayor is right there within the city and the confines. So use that as a leverage first. Like, obviously, we want to implement change on a national level, but those changes don't happen as fast. And so taking your time by building that relationship with those constituents within, the demographics or the different area codes, that can also help you to build not only the synergy between all the communities, but also being on the same playing field as understanding this is what we need. And as our mayor, are you able to meet us where we are? And if not, how can we work together so that our city is also reflective of what you would want, since you are managing our city?
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I could count how many times you use the word "our" in that answer. It's just beautiful. If our
Mhm.
elected officials use the word "our" more than me,
Yeah.
we would be in a very different place here. And in some
Mhm.
ways, we've eroded that sense of a thriving Commonwealth together.
Mhm.
And we've come to expect that programs and projects and professionals are the ones who are going to, kind of make us healthy. It
Yeah.
really is a much more of a team
It's a
sport than
relationship,
an
I feel like,
exactly.
you have to, because obviously they're in control maybe of more of the federal dollars that come down to your city, but at this, or your state or wherever, but it's also like you have to be able to emphasize your needs as a community. If you know that you need more reliable transportation or there are public housing issues, be, transparent about that. I know, well, not Gracie. Yeah, Grace mentioned, about the bad things that are going on. Take those to your elected officials. Advocate for yourself in your community of what your needs are, because they're going to create their agenda of what they want for the community, but you all are the ones living in there and breathing whatever is going on. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for what you need, and also, go together with those community-based organizations that are doing the work, because you all will be able to tell a story that that elected official will not be able to tell without you all being there to provide that context.
Great question, John. Any others in our last few minutes together?
I can go ahead and ask a question instead of putting it in the chat. Can you say a little bit more about the capacity building that it takes for doing shared stewardship well?
Yeah, wow, amazing question. Yeah, let's hit some of the highlights here. The first thing to say is that um, the role of a steward is a little bit different than a leader on behalf of their issue or organization. So we have leadership, and it's actually um, it's it is responsible for making great strides in all kinds of things. So like leadership, AIDS is different than arthritis, is different than asthma. Like we definitely need people focused on their areas of expertise. But it also creates a kind of side effect that can actually become even a worse obstacle, which is the fragmentation. Everybody waking up, working on their own issue, um, with the assumption that other people are going to do their part and somehow it's going to add up to a better, more equitable system. That's the sort of second shadow problem that we need to concentrate on also. And so we could do more than just leading on behalf of our own issues and organizations, which really squanders a lot of resources, right?
Mhm.
If we can connect across our boundaries in ways that really unify around a bigger project, a bigger why, an easier to understand answer of why we are so interdependent. And you may be working on housing and you may be working on transportation. I loved your stories, Bailey, about the topics are not the headline. The headline is our quest to thrive together, our actions as shared stewardship. And then we can see how some of us are doing this as educators and some of us are doing it in community health centers, and others are just, giving people a lift to get the 30 miles that they wouldn't have been able to get any other way. And so that ethos of we can also be better stewards of systems, even though we are, often concentrating on the part that we're trying to lead. Without that shared stewardship, it really is hard to see this work become strong enough and last long enough to really make major strides in systems. The only other thing I'll say with time being tight is that where do people learn about stewardship, right? It's not necessarily something you learn in school. Many organizations, it isn't something you learn on the job, but it is a capability that all of us have, right? It is a set of mindsets and practices that aren't always rewarded in organizations, but people can cultivate those habits in themselves and in each other. And they can travel really far, really fast. You can get to a place where, an organization like the community health centers, which, let's face it, for decades, has had a really good idea that America's sort of civic story is made better by community health centers. And
Mhm.
and we've allowed them to erode over decades, it's still an important thing. But, you know, a new generation of professionals like Bailey organizing around vital conditions can breathe life into this. And so it allows stewardship to happen even within the walls of an institution as it's, you know, sort of continuing its evolution. That's true for all of us, like individually and through our own organizations. We can make institutional change and we can make system change by starting to cultivate some of these practices of shared stewardship. I will put in the chat a little link to those practices. Are not mysterious and they're not like newfangled or technical. They are habits of how people connect across difference. How do they expand opportunities and how do they learn and adapt over time? All of the things that we've learned with stewards over decades now point again and again to those are the key skill sets that happen in this work. And I'll put this in the chat here, this little document about the latest set of what our team has come to recognize as kind of essential stewardship practices. They're all things that, you know, any of us can start learning, and then it becomes a lifelong practice. Great question, Andy. John, maybe I'll give you the last few minutes about where this work goes from the National Forum.
Thank you, Dr. Milstein. Thank you, Bailey Spates. Thank you to Andy and Grace and Brenda for the questions and the comments. We appreciate all of them. My gosh, this hour just flew by. We appreciate, Bobby, your opening your door for office hours and the opportunity not only to learn more about the vital conditions, but to hear from Bailey how you're putting them into practice through not only NAC, but through community health centers across the country that are deeply embedded in the communities they serve. So it's very exciting. Want to thank the National Forum team, Julie Harville, our head of convenings and director of operations, Whitney Weber, and others who've put together this session. Stacy Resendez for getting communications out, and want to thank everybody who participated. Thank our contributing members who make it possible for us to hold programs like this. As everybody recognizes, you can't save the world if you can't pay the rent. So we are grateful to those contributing members. And thank you to the National Forum members who participated, and most of all today to Dr. Milstein and Bailey Spates for your leadership, for your stewardship, and for sharing your great work. We look forward to doing this with you again, maybe in a couple of months. I think there'll be more to catch up on, more learnings to share, and perhaps new people will have additional examples to share. So
yeah,
with that, this has been recorded. If you know someone who is interested in this or who could put this discussion to use in their work, but they just weren't able to fit this session into their schedule, please, when you receive the link, share it with them so that they can listen to this discussion and get on the list to find out about the next office hours session. And with that, please go forward and let's strengthen the vital conditions for health and well-being.
Bye.
You guys, that was amazing. It's so wonderful. And I'm glad we ended up having questions. I think people were shy to get started, but you know, I'm impressed that we had, gosh, 46 people, you know, total. And we always, you know, think it's usually about 70% of those who register. So pretty darn exciting.
Hey, there's Brenda at 10 p.m., I think. Hi,
Brenda and
Brenda.
her organization is the newest member of the National Forum. So great to get to see you in person.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We hope in a couple of months when we do this again, you'll be able to come on camera and share how you've put some of these learnings to use in Zambia.
I'll do that.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll send out an evaluation tomorrow. Bailey and Bobby, I'll just send you a couple questions that we might want to use, and you guys can see if there's anything else you want to have included as well. So
Yeah.
one of the things I want to ask is, as John mentioned, should we do this again in a few months? And if people are willing, because I really would like to see this keeping this going. So
Yeah, and the main question is that net promoter question, like, is this something you would recommend to a friend or colleague?
Mm.
If they only answer one question, that's the one you want to know. And then you can ask any other things underneath
Okay.
there.
Absolutely. And if you are interested in doing this again, maybe we can have, a health center actually present, or speak from their personal experience, about their implementation of the vital condition.
Yeah, that's been every time that we've had like spotlight sessions,
Mhm.
we started with having like one person tell the story of others, and then it
Mm.
started to be several people, their perspectives about the same place or the same activity or something. And the audience really lights up at that point because it's like, oh, this isn't just, something that it's not a program or project, right? I mean, people have
Right.
the energy about why is it that they're doing their part. And when you get 2 or 3 stories about the same thing, the audience member can start to recognize, oh, I know some of those people that I could team up with in my work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Bailey, as you were talking, I was thinking to Bobby's point just now, I was thinking about the SAC system, SAC health system in San Bernardino, and how they've expanded beyond the health clinics to have the academy there that is